Imagine a treatment so different from traditional medicine that it doesn't need to be taken every day, but only once or twice. And yet it produces profound changes that last for months. A treatment where the active ingredient is not just a substance, but an experience. Intense, transformative, and often described as mystical. That's the promise and the enigma of the new science of psychedelics. But like every scientific revolution, it comes with profound philosophical questions. What if science was wrong about consciousness? What if it wasn't the brain that produces the mind, but the mind that shapes the brain? It sounds bold, but research in neuroplasticity, psychedelics, spirituality, and philosophy of mind is beginning to show exactly that. Today, we'll examine why materialism is losing ground, how psychedelics reveal deeper layers of the mind, why consciousness might be a fundamental field, and how intentional practices can literally rewire the brain. For more than a century, the dominant view in science was simple. The mind is only what the brain does. Consciousness? A byproduct of chemical reactions. This is what philosophers call materialism. But, as David Chalmers says, a gigantic obstacle arises. How do physical processes produce subjective experience? The famous hard problem of consciousness. Numerous scientists, such as Mario Beauregard, the spiritual brain, point out that this explanation no longer works. Bernardo Kastrup, in The Idea of the World, shows that materialism cannot even logically account for mental reality. But another factor accelerates this change: neuroplasticity. The brain is not a fixed system. It reorganizes itself according to intention, attention, and behavior. Experience shapes biology, and this is not compatible with rigid materialism. Christoph Marine, a neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins, states, "The brain not only reacts, it reorganizes itself in response to intention and attention. This means that thoughts, beliefs, and states of consciousness physically alter neural connections." Examples that confirm this point: mindfulness studies generate new synapses. Trauma therapies reopen neural pathways. Altered beliefs change emotional and behavioral responses. After decades of prohibition, substances like LSD, psilocybin, and DMT have returned to the center of scientific research. Today we know that when used in a safe, clinical context, they are not toxic, they are not addictive, and they have much lower risks than previously thought. More importantly, studies show promising efficacy for treatment-resistant depression, existential anxiety in cancer patients, chemical dependency, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. And in all these scenarios, one variable repeatedly appears as a predictor of improvement: the intensity of the mystical experience. Historically, mystical experiences were seen as religious phenomena, but modern psychology measures them with scales like the Mystical Experience Questionnaire, which includes elements like a feeling of unity, transcendence of time and space, ego dissolution, perception of profound meaning. These elements, especially ego dissolution, are strongly correlated with the best therapeutic outcomes. But then arises the philosophical problem that Letheby highlights. Critics say, if psychedelics work because they make a person believe in a spiritual universe or in a cosmic consciousness, then they are just comforting delusions. This is the comforting delusion objection. Letheby responds with a bold strategy. Even assuming that naturalism is true, that is, that cosmic consciousness does not exist, Psychedelics don't work by inducing metaphysical delusions. Why? Because improvement occurs even when the patient does not adopt supernatural beliefs. What matters is not metaphysical belief, but the transformation of how the self is shaped by the brain. Letheby uses the predictive processing model. The brain is a prediction machine. It creates models to anticipate the world, and one of these models is the self. This self model functions as a representational center of gravity that organizes thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. In situations of mental suffering, depression, anxiety, addictions, this self model becomes rigid, inflexible, trapped in automatic patterns. Psilocybin and other psychedelics do something extraordinary. They relax this model, decreasing the rigidity of automatic beliefs. This process is called rebus, relaxed beliefs under psychedelics. When the circuits that support the self become temporarily disorganized, ego dissolution occurs. This doesn't mean that the self disappears in a literal sense. It means that the boundaries we normally feel between self and the world, between self and my thoughts, become more flexible. This state allows for three central therapeutic effects: access to repressed emotions, catharsis; revision of rigid beliefs about oneself; experience of connection, not metaphysical, but psychological and existential. That is to say, the experience is mystical, but not necessarily supernatural. Letheby argues that psychedelics are epistemically innocent. They may generate cognitive imperfections, but they bring knowledge that could not be obtained otherwise. This knowledge has three dimensions. Knowledge by acquaintance. The subject directly experiences new modes of attention, presence, and perception, like Mary, the neuroscientist in the famous thought experiment, seeing the color red for the first time. Practical knowledge. Knowledge how. The person learns how to access healthier mental states. And new meanings for old facts. Things that the person already knew intellectually, such as "I have value," become experienced in a profound and motivating way. Letheby proposes that psychedelics don't need supernatural explanations. It's possible to have a spiritual experience without violating naturalism. Spiritual here means decentering of the ego, expansion of perspective, feeling of connection, perceptual openness, perception of existential value. This is very similar to what Iris Murdoch called unselfing, the temporary suspension of the egocentric narratives that structure our attention. If the mind can reorganize the brain, then the mind is not an epiphenomenon of the brain. There is causality in the reverse direction. We are dealing with the relational, not a reductionist model. Psychedelics research is one of the most devastating areas for materialism. Studies by Griffiths at Johns Hopkins show that a single session with psilocybin can reduce anxiety and depression for up to a year. Individuals report experiences of unity, ego dissolution, encounters with sources of wisdom, and these experiences profoundly change behavior. Traditionally, this was dismissed as hallucination. But why would hallucinations disrupt the brain and, paradoxically, make it healthier? Neuroscience suggests something different. Psilocybin deactivates the default mode network, the neural center of the ego. When this filter falls, a broader perception emerges, as if we had access to normally obstructed layers of consciousness. As Quantum Enigma says, consciousness is not just an observer, it participates in reality. So the question ceases to be, do psychedelics create illusions? And it becomes, do they reveal what the ego hides? Several scientists and philosophers are beginning to converge on the same hypothesis. Consciousness is primary. Matter is secondary. This is monistic idealism. Mario Beauregard considers the mind not reducible to the brain. James Glatfelder interprets it as a phenomenon of deep information. And modern physics suggests that consciousness influences outcomes, as in the interpretations of quantum mechanics in the double-slit experiment. If consciousness is a field, the brain would be a receiver, not a producer. Psychedelics would tune or alter this channel.
Neuroplasticity would be the biological proof of this interaction. We are not abandoning science. We are expanding its reach. Christophe Marin proposes the open model, which integrates science, spirituality, and transformative practice. He works with 3 levels of the self: primal, body, instinct, emotion; rational, logic, language, narrative; and spiritual, meaning, transcendence, and connection. Each level transforms through rituals, movement, breath, and grounding, music, learning, and creativity, prayer, meditation, and, in appropriate contexts, psychedelics. These rituals are not symbolic. They are neurospiritual interventions. They reorganize the neural architecture. They alter the internal history. They expand consciousness. The message: you are not a fixed machine. You are a continuously updating process. Science is changing. Materialism cannot explain neuroplasticity, consistent mystical experiences, profound transformations induced by psychedelics, the difficult problem of consciousness. We are moving towards a broader model in which consciousness and brain interact. The self is a fluid field, and reality may be, in its essence, mental. The goal is not to abandon science, but to liberate it, to return to its original mission, to describe reality as she is, not as our ideological filters say she should be. If consciousness is vaster than we imagined, then each person is much more than a brain. It is an expanding field, a process in progress, an opening to the infinite.